on the sidewalk. And as photojournalists, that goes really counterintuitive to kind of everything we're taught. You know, we embrace people, we get close to people, we get intimate with people, and that's just not the responsible thing to do right now. And so I think the safety of not only yourself, but the people that you're photographing, and then the people that you come home to, or the people that you have photographed go home to. I mean, if you're asymptomatic and you give it to someone who is also asymptomatic, and both of you think you don't have it, and then they go to their very vulnerable family member, they can give it to them and potentially kill them. And I think that that is something that we all need to hear, is that we have the potential to kill people by our coverage. And I don't know if that's really a situation that we run into very often. I mean, and I think in the other situations where we would run into that, we would take extreme precautions. So I just think it's incredibly important to maintain that distancing. That's the most important thing I can say. I've been making really great use of my 70-200, of my 100-400. Sometimes I'll only take those just to kind of force myself to stay away from people, you know? Why take the wide angle lens if I know I'm not gonna, using it and getting in close is going to put people at risk. So sometimes, you know, not all the time, sometimes I just don't take it though. So I'm gonna talk about a few things that I've done or I've started doing since this all came about. And this is, you know, kind of evolved over time from, again, listening to CDC stuff, talking with other journalists, talking with journalists in places like San Francisco and Seattle and New York, places where it's much worse than it is here in Minneapolis. But I'm by no means an expert on this, but this is what, you know, kind of some of the steps that I've started taking to help mitigate anything that I can. The first thing is just, I've started wearing rubber gloves. These are some kind of thicker rubber gloves that I got at a pack of 50. I bought a few boxes of them at Home Depot. They're kind of made for like mechanics, if I understand the packaging right. It's like for mechanics and yard work and stuff like that. I like them. They're a little thicker than just your standard like latex gloves. So I usually use them one pair a day. I'll be washing them when I can. I'll use hand sanitizer on them when I can. I basically treat them just like they're my hands, but I started wearing them because I was just destroying my hands with all the washing that I was doing in hot water with soap. And, you know, it was just completely ripping up my hands. So the gloves are nice in that you can still work with them. They're tight enough that you can work with your cameras. They've got this little grip built into the tips of them. It's a little textured, which is nice. Allows you to get in on those dials and buttons and stuff. And, you know, everyone's kind of wearing gloves right now. At first it was a little weird. I think subjects were like, huh? But now it's like everyone's wearing gloves. So it's really not that big of a deal. So I've started wearing the rubber gloves, which have been helpful. Clorox wipes. My car will never not smell like these things, guys. It is permanently embedded into the fabric of my car. Every single time I get out of my car, if I have any inkling that I've touched anything or brushed up against anything or come too close to someone, a lot of times right now it's still pretty cool here in Minnesota. I've been wearing a rain jacket over my regular coat because I can just wipe down the rain jacket. I mean, I can, you know, it's a surface that I can clean very easily. So I'm also trying to think about the clothing that I'm wearing when I go out. And is it easy to clean? Is it easy to wipe off? Is it something that it's, you know, that it's gonna cling to, or, you know, anything like that? But Clorox wipes, get these when you can, you know, don't hoard, but they're incredibly helpful. Wipe down your door handles of your car, your cameras, your gloves that you're wearing. You know, if you're wearing a jacket and you think it needs it. My steering wheel, I wipe down all the time. My shifter, my brake, you know, you just kind of take stock of what you're using in your car and touching often. And that all gets a really, really thorough wipe down with the Clorox wipes. I'll also wipe down my shoes if I've been stepping in, you know, if I've gone in anywhere where I think I might have stepped in anything. I mean, people cough, you don't know where that lands. We don't know about this. So I'm taking every single precaution that I can, and these are a great way. I also carry a smaller pack of them. You know, I do that too. Again, I sound like a crazy person, but just since we don't know. Hand sanitizer. You can't wash your hands necessarily when you get back to the car right after you've been shooting something, but you can use hand sanitizer. You can use it on the rubber gloves. You can use it on your hands. You can use it really on anything. It's the alcohol in here that's doing the job. So this is great. I've also got a few of these smaller bottles and have been filling them off these bigger ones. And these are great because I can just throw this in my pocket. I'm not walking around with this giant thing. And that's been really helpful. Let's see what else we got here. So masks. The CDC announced, you know, just the other day, and the White House announced the other day that they are recommending everyone wear masks. They weren't recommending it before. And honestly, if you don't have an N95 mask already, the chances of you getting one right now are just almost impossible. They're nowhere to be found. And the ones that are available are going straight to hospital workers. So I can't argue with that in any way. If you're lucky enough, some people had them before this all started and they were already open, so they're going to be donated, and that's kind of how we ended up with some. But N95 masks, if you have to do any sort of close proximity to people, moving through even like a grocery store at this point, because we don't know, you know, you kind of have to take every precaution you possibly can. And if this can, in fact, be transmitted just by us breathing and giving it to other people, which is a theory that's been floated out many times, wearing a mask, you know. And then also, I don't have it with me, but some people are making like a fabric cover for these masks, which are, you know, allow them to kind of be cleaned a little more easily. You can kind of clean the cover off a little easier, treat this as like the second filtering layer. And you can really get a lot of mileage out of these. I personally try to not use it unless, again, it's direly, you know, it's unavoidable that I can't stay that 10 feet away from everyone that I'm trying to maintain. So if you do have an N95 mask, put it in a plastic bag. Don't just keep it out, because then you don't know how it's getting contaminated. Keep it in a plastic bag. Keep it out of sight. People will break your car windows for these guys. But it is something good to have, you know, in the trunk of your car or in your backpack or whatever, just in case it does come to it that you need it. That is kind of, you know, when I do get home from assignments after I've been out photographing, again, I try to wear a rain jacket as my primary outer shell on top so I can wipe that down or clean that as I need. I immediately come inside. I leave my shoes outside after I've wiped them off. I come inside, I go straight downstairs to the washing machine. I take everything off, it goes in, I come upstairs, I take a shower. I take every precaution that I possibly can. And again, I still treat myself like I have it. I still act as if I'm carrying it and I have the ability to transmit it to other people. Because until there's a test that we can take, or until there's something about that, there's, you know, there's no greater precautions I think that we can take. That's kind of my thoughts on COVID. I don't know if people have questions about this right now. There's some other things that I kind of wanted to mention. I don't know, Hannah, if anyone's jumping in.
I'm seeing a note from Evan here about the hand sanitizer, about letting it evaporate on your hands before wiping.
Yep.
Wiping that off. So.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the education. That's really important, guys, is a lot of us, when we first started using these products, a lot of us found out we were using them wrong. We weren't allowing them to sit on the surfaces as long as they need to in order to do their job. Now, I have read that, you know, a lot of these bottles say, you know, can say for up to 2 minutes. The CDC says if it's on there for about 30 seconds, you've killed this thing. It's not a terribly resilient virus. It can be killed with sunlight. You know, if you don't know if something that you have has been contaminated, leave it outside in the sunlight for a day or two. And there's, you know, the ideas of how long this virus lasts, all of those you have to understand are in lab conditions. So they're in absolute ideal conditions. You put something outside in the sun with humidity out, you know, outside in the wind, the sun's gonna do its job on a lot of things. So that's another good way to kind of disinfect things as you go along.
Ben Brewer is asking how the different disinfectants are damaging rubbers, plastics, components on your camera equipment.
You know, I haven't seen any sort of issue with that. The one thing that I've seen is this is kind of silly, but I've got a wooden phone case and it's just completely like, you know, stripped every single oil out of that thing. But my cameras, in all honesty, we've been told by our director of photography, do what you got to do. And if we got to send the cameras in for repairs, we got to send the cameras in for repairs. I mean, it's kind of at that point right now. So I'm taking fewer, you know, I wipe down my cameras. I try, you know, the hand sanitizer will do its job. It just kind of evaporates off of things. So, but also, you know, if I'm religiously maintaining that 10-foot rule or whatever that I'm trying to hold, you know, I like to think that I don't just have stuff on me, but again, you know, I don't think we can be too cautious. I can't hear you, Hannah.
I was writing in the chat. I have a bunch of spaces in the chat. Sorry. If anybody else has any other questions for Anthony regarding coronavirus and
I have some other things here too that we can talk about, just kind of general staying safe, things to possibly keep in your car and stuff like that. But if anyone, like, let's talk about corona right now. If anyone needs
yeah, so, oh, here we go. We're getting some questions now. From Evan again, our client on campus asked us to get a shot of, you know, showed Getty images as an example of workers cleaning, spraying surfaces on campuses. What's the onus of the photog professional to get in, and safety versus your employer, what they're asking you to do?
Turn down anything that you don't feel comfortable with, 100%. That your safety here is primary in everything that you do. So I'm one of those people that's of the opinion that no photograph is worth dying for, is worth getting gravely injured for, anything like that. So if you don't feel comfortable doing something, tell your employer, I don't feel comfortable doing that. If your employer is forcing, you know, is trying to force that, then that's, you know, that's an HR discussion. That's a discussion with your, you know, newspaper advisor. That's a greater conversation, you know, up the chain. But right now, do not feel, you know, and this goes out to anyone working at any newspaper right now. Your safety is primary. Don't let anyone tell you, we really need that, or you got to do this, or something like that. It's not worth it. It's just not, if you don't feel comfortable with it at all.
Oh, I am already out of mute. So I have a question, kind of a double question. I'm just going to combine Sid and Aaliyah here about the N95 mask and the effectiveness with your beard. And then also you had mentioned kind of the cloth mask and just using, you know, whether just using that is something you would consider.
So yeah, with the N95 mask with the beard is definitely a concern and something that's been raised by a lot of people recently. This is honestly as long as mine usually gets, and I haven't trimmed it in a few days. But yeah, I think if you have a beard, one of our photo editors, Kevin Martin, texted us all this morning. I don't think I've ever seen him in my life without a beard, and he sent us all a picture of himself without one this morning. So it was kind of funny, you know, you're seeing people in a whole new light, you know, really. But yeah, definitely think about that, guys. If you've got a beard going on, it's not as effective. It doesn't make it as effective of a seal. The other thing that's important to understand about these N95 masks, guys, is they have this metal bridge right here. And that's not just like a standard thing. That's meant to be bent and plied around the bridge of your nose so that it makes a good seal. And you know, one of our photographers had mentioned that he put a little piece of tape right there just below it to keep it from sliding down, and also to kind of give it something to press up against. But definitely, if you do have one of these masks, make sure you fit it right, make sure you put it on, bend that around your nose, make sure that you're getting a good seal. If you've got a beard, go ahead and trim it or shave altogether. And also, you know, kind of practice with it. You know, when you first get it, put it on, walk around the house, shoot some pictures, see how it changes the way that you bring the camera up. And another further point on that, one of our photographers has taken to using the back of his camera to take pictures a lot. Like, he'll hold the camera away from his face and use that back LCD screen so that he's not bringing the camera up to his face. You know, he brought up the really good point that if he's walking through a supermarket or something like that, people are breathing, people are coughing, you're trying to, you know, mitigate and maneuver through all that. But then you bring the camera up to your face that's caught all that, you know, something to keep in mind at least.
So John W. is asking if you are going into locations or if you're having your subjects come outside. What's your kind of general way you're operating on assignment these days?
So we are no longer going in people's homes. We're mostly not going in their buildings. If they, you know, definitely, you know, if they live in an apartment building, I don't even really want to go in the lobby of something like that, things that are really densely packed. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times I'm calling the subject when I'm on the way. I just go ahead and explain it to them. Like, this isn't about you. I'm not worried about you. I just come in contact with a lot of people and I'm trying to be as safe as I can. I'm gonna need you to come outside. And then again, we have a conversation from 10 feet away and I'll do a portrait of them or something like that. In terms of going into other buildings, I try to kind of gauge it by how big is the building. I don't know if that's scientific or if that's just, you know, me making that up, but I've tried to use that as my my measure for am I going to go in here? Do I have enough room to maintain 10 feet away from a person? Have a lot of people been in this building recently? Yesterday, I was running around a giant greenhouse with some zookeepers and penguins. I had a lot of room in there. I don't think I really came within 10 feet of them really the entire time I was there. Maybe in one instance where I had to scoop by someone. But again, a situation like that, a situation like I'm going to go into a gymnasium or something like that, I don't really have too big of a problem with. But if I can, I prefer to be out in open air. I prefer to people, you know, I don't want to be breathing, you know, the same air as people in case it is airborne. So if I can prevent that in any way, I definitely will. I'll try to do things to where they're outside more, definitely.
So I'm not seeing any additional questions here, but I know you mentioned that you're following along with the CDC. Are there any other specific photographers that you're sort of seeing on social media that you're paying more attention to?
Definitely. You know, Jessica Christian in San Francisco, Lindsay Watson in Seattle. Basically, you can look at where are the big places that this is happening, and you know, who are the newspaper photographers working in that area. I mean, we can't work from home, so a lot of photo departments are operating more or less similar to how they were. I mean, I jokingly never come into the office anyway, so this just isn't really that different from me. I worked out of my car primarily anyway. So we're not really operating very differently in that capacity. But it's just, you know, I don't know, you do what you can, I guess.
Any more questions on COVID coverage before we move on to other general? There we go, Joan McKinney. What are the older people at your newspaper doing, especially photojournalists?
Sure. So, I think everyone's taking their own precautions and everyone's kind of judging it for themselves. We have a fantastic director of photography in Deb Pastner, and she has made it abundantly clear to us that if we feel uncomfortable with anything, just let her know, and we don't have to do that. But some of our more senior photographers are some of the most prolific shooters we have. I can't say that. Shooters that we have right now. So David Joels is going out every single morning and coming back with amazing stuff. I think that guy's had the front page of our newspaper 50% of the time since this has begun. So I encourage people that would possibly find themselves in a more vulnerable position to take, as many steps as they can to put themselves in as safe of a place that they can. And if that means, again, using long lenses, turning down assignments, keeping your distance from people, I think all of these things are just important. And you have to be assertive with that. You have to be able to be comfortable saying, I'm not okay with this. I don't want to do that. I was talking with a photojournalist colleague, at a different paper the other day, and her paper had asked her to go shoot someone that had tested positive for COVID and they wanted her to go shoot a portrait of him. And she just didn't feel comfortable given the scenario and some other factors that were involved with it. And she just blatantly turned them down. And I don't think anyone should be afraid to do that in this situation. This is unlike anything that we've ever come across. This isn't like a natural disaster. It's not, but I would argue the same in a natural disaster. But there are so many unknowns here, I guess, that I think you definitely get a little more leeway in saying, I can't do that, or I'm not comfortable doing that, or let's talk about a different way to do that, because, there's ways to solve problems and not all of them involve, putting yourself at risk.
So we have a question here from Catherine, is that there's been a lot of guidelines for photographers that have been published recently from, CPJ, Everyday Projects. I know I've seen stuff from Mppa and ASMP and a lot of other things. Are you just internalizing all that information, or are you finding one resource a little bit better than others?
I think I really think that you do your best, just like kind of with everything. If you look at all of those different sources, kind of look at what the key points that keep popping up on different lists are. I don't think that any amount of information can be too much information at this point. If I find some obscure list and they mention the thing about the nose band on the N95s that I hadn't thought about before, that's great. I'm not turning down any information at this point. I think it's very important. Obviously, we as journalists make sure that comes from a credible source, and that we're not, looking at misleading things. But all of those resources right now, I think, are helpful, and I think everyone's doing their best to try to figure this out as they can, as they go. The one thing I would caution strongly against, and this kind of came up, on Twitter the other day, is turning this into something that's competitive, or something where we're trying to outdo each other, or not put safety as the primary concern here, because safety has to be the primary concern here.
Okay, I think we can start to switch gears. Obviously, we can come back to the subject at the end.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, if you think of anything, if you just jumped on, if you want to circle back to something, I'm happy to talk about anything. And again, talk to as many people as you can. Talk to other photographers who are in places where this has been going on longer, where this is more widespread. I think the more information that anyone can get out there is the better. So I would definitely encourage everyone to do that. You know, I was talking to Hannah and we were talking about just kind of general safety stuff you might want to keep in your car, just different scenarios you might run into. Staying safe is the primary concern, at least for me, with everything that I do. I'm never going to put myself in an unsafe situation. I've taken photos that look like I was in an unsafe situation, but I take every single risk, or I'm sorry, a step to mitigate risk behind the scenes that I possibly can, so that I'm not really in a risky situation when I take those photographs. This is going to sound silly. I think one of the most helpful things, though, is just like wearing your press ID. If you have a press ID, like, just wear it. You know, I mean, obviously there's some situations where you might not want to wear it, or it's going to make you stand out in a way that you don't want to, and that's fine. But a general rule of thumb is I wear my press ID. It just kind of helps reinforce who I am and why I'm there and what I'm doing. Oftentimes people will kind of look over at me, and then I kind of watch their eyes just trail right down to my ID hanging around my neck, and all their questions are immediately answered, you know? So I think that that's a really helpful thing, is just wearing an ID, or at least having one with you if you have that capability, if you're not freelancing. So that's helpful. Another kind of really simple thing that I think is important that I don't think people necessarily think about is I carry one of these battery packs with an extra phone charger cable in it in my car or backpack at all times. The last thing I want to do is be in a situation where I need to contact help. I need to contact an editor. I need to contact someone, and my phone's dead, or I don't have power for it. So I always have an extra phone charger with me. I think that that's really helpful, and has saved me a few times, especially in rural areas where your phone starts draining, battery a little quicker as it tries to find signal. So that's kind of helpful. A few things that I keep in the trunk of my car, just, this is like anything. We have no idea what we're going to walk into on any given day. You carry a lot of lenses with you, you carry other safety equipment with you just in case. So I carry 2 vests with me. One's orange and one's yellow. These are helpful. A lot of times we don't want to stand out. I get that. But sometimes it's helpful if I have to pull over on the side of the road and make a landscape of a cityscape or something like that. If I need to get out of my car and be, in a precarious situation, it just helps people see me. And a lot of times it also just kind of prevents people from stopping, kind of wondering what you're doing. Cops will pull up, Good Samaritans will pull up thinking your battery's dead or something like that. Having a vest on is something that you can do to mitigate those risks. I see Sid jumping on here. I think he's mentioning that you can also get those NPPA IDs for freelancers, which is another really good option to have if you're looking to identify yourself as a member of the press to people that you're working with.
Yeah, I know for me personally, I went out to a protest one day, and I didn't have anything, but I ran into somebody and they had their MPPA one, and I was like, oh, I never realized that is so useful.
Right.
For photographers that are freelancing and don't necessarily have an organizational ID.
Definitely. Yeah, and you kind of separate yourself from the protesters. A lot of times when we get to these situations these days, protesters have the exact same cameras we have. So it's just kind of a way so that if officers start kettling the group, or you start, getting boxed in or something like that, you can distinguish yourself from everyone, or, at least the protesters, and explain that you're a member of the press, and that might be able to get you a little bit more of a professional courtesy. So, are there any questions popping in here?
Yeah. So Leah was asking, if somebody asks you what the MPPA ID means, what would you sort of say to that person?
So, the National Press Photographers Association, I'd explain that, this shows that I'm a member in good standing of the National Press Photographers Association. And, it kind of depends on how deep they want to get into it. You can explain that there's a code of ethics that goes with that you have to sign off on, and you are held to a certain degree of professional standards. And, you know, really, at the end of the day, though, and I think they even say this on the site, it's just a form of identification. It's just to let you know who I am. It's here's my name clearly. I'm not trying to hide anything. This is who I am, and it's just a way for me to be transparent about what I'm out doing.
And if you are on an assignment, I would definitely recommend then saying who you're on an assignment for.
Yeah, certainly. You know, if you're a freelancer and you're shooting for different organizations every day, definitely go ahead and identify the organization you're shooting for. It just helps lend credibility to kind of what you're out doing. Anyone, we move on here?
Well, I was going to say too, I know that NPR, we would, if it was something that we thought was concerning, we would often issue them a sort of a letter of credential just to sort of make sure they, you know, had something that said they were working for us.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're working, you know, if you're freelancing and you're working for an organization, and especially if you're going to have to be doing something that's going to be involving getting access to something, or you know, where your word might not be enough, don't be afraid to ask for a letterhead, you know, with your intent from an editor out there, just to show people should you come across that issue. Definitely. So just a few other things that I carry in my car. I didn't go grab them, but they're still in my car. But I carry a first aid kit in the back of my car. It's pretty decently stocked. It's not just a little one. It's got a little more than what your standard first aid kit would have, but it's not huge either. So I just keep that tucked in the back of my trunk. I also have made it a point to understand how to use everything in it. I think that that's a thing that a lot of people buy these kits and they don't understand how they're used, what to use certain things for, what precautions to take when you're having to implement them. So again, education, super important. I think that that's the most important thing that you can do for your safety. I also keep just like a AAA pack in my car that's got jumper cables and road flares and things like that. As photojournalists, we kind of live out of our cars. We're in them a lot, and sometimes the unexpected happens and we break down, or we find ourselves in a situation where we're stuck. And just having a simple kit that can at least solve a few problems. I mean, it's just like your camera bag. It's all tools to help you solve different problems out in the field. And these just happen to relate to safety. Getting into some more specialized stuff, you know, obviously if you live out west and you're covering fires, touch base with the people out there that cover fires and have the proper equipment to do things like that. That's not something we run into here in Minnesota, so not really anything I have to worry about. I have been to my share of protests. I would borderline call them riots. Ferguson, I covered overnight homicides in Chicago for 4 years or so. So sometimes you find yourself in situations where you need safety gear. You need stuff to protect you. So that can range from simple stuff like safety glasses that you put over your glasses. Sometimes you walk into situations and they require safety glasses. Well, hey, I've got my own. I don't need you to go get me any or any. So I just got some with me. Same with a hard hat. You know, I keep one of those in the back of my trunk. I've got my own hard hat. I don't have to put on someone else's hard hat, you know. And it's got the markings on it that show that it's rated for construction sites and stuff like that. You know, I hate to show some of this stuff just because it's like, I don't want to be like alarmist, but like, this is a Kevlar helmet. I've used this thing several times. I've had this on in Ferguson when they started shooting tear gas canisters at us. You can actually see right here, this little white mark right here or so, right here. I was photographing them flipping a cop car and lighting it on fire, and some dude threw a chunk of cinder block, and that hit me in the back of the head. And that hit right here on this Kevlar helmet. And so I always think about that, because if I hadn't had this Kevlar helmet on, I could be dead. I mean, I'd probably be dead, to be all honest. So it looks extreme. Sometimes, you know, it's like, oh God, I don't want to be that dude that's out there wearing the Kevlar helmet. But my God, this is like a perfect example of a time when if I didn't have this on, this could have done a lot of damage to me. Hand in hand with the Kevlar helmet I also have a gas mask that I keep available to me. I don't always, this isn't rolling around in the trunk of my car, but I have it, and I have one, and I have, most importantly, extra filters and sealed filters, because these things go bad. They've got expiration dates on them. You really have to understand how they work. But let me tell you, when they were shooting tear gas at us in Ferguson, this was the only thing you wanted in the world. You would have given the shirt off your back for one of these. So these are really important. It's also really important to understand how they work and how they work with your other pieces of safety gear. So for instance, when we first started covering events like that, I was at the Chicago Tribune, and we had two types of gas masks. We had these, which are military style gas masks, and we had industrial style gas masks. So we had some of each, and we were kind of testing out to see which worked better and which kind of, was more comfortable and which we could shoot through better. And honestly, the one that checked all of those boxes was the industrial gas mask. They're made to work out of better, they actually, in that sense, can be a little easier. But what we found out was that industrial gas masks are not made to be worn at the same time that you're wearing a Kevlar helmet. So as soon as you put the Kevlar helmet on with the gas mask, that's the industrial one, this little bridge right here breaks the seal at the top of your gas mask, and you start choking to death because you're getting tear gas. So this goes back to education. It's really, really, really important to understand what you have and how they all work and how they all work together. It's important to go out and try this stuff on. Try it on in your house. You're gonna look like a weirdo to your neighbors, but put this stuff on and walk around your house with a camera and understand how insanely different it is to try to take pictures with this on. I mean, it really is a very, very different experience. And so, as with any safety gear, it's important to understand what you have, understand its limitations and what it's going to do, what it's going to work for, what it's not going to work for. I think some people, buy this and they think it'll do everything. You really have to understand, read the instructions, go online, watch YouTube videos, get as much information you can so you understand what you're going out with and how to use it properly and how to protect yourself. Another thing.
So, Anthony, sorry to interrupt. Just seeing a question here. Now, are you going out and purchasing this, or is your employer providing this equipment?
So, I think you have to gauge what type of situation you're in. Some of this was purchased for me. Some of it I purchased on my own. Some of it was given to me. You procure things any way that you can. If you're on staff at somewhere, I would advocate for you that you advocate to your employer that they purchase this stuff for you, just like they provide you with equipment. I understand that freelancers don't have that luxury. And so, but I would also argue that some of this stuff is just as important as a lens or as a, camera body or a laptop. I mean, you can't take pictures if you're injured or if you're, and if you are injured and you're a freelancer, then you can't take pictures for the entire time that you're recovering. So I would argue that this stuff is very important, and to just understand the types of situations that you go into. This is very individualized for everyone. I mean, not everyone's going to need this type of equipment. Not everyone goes into these types of situations. I mean, some people turn these assignments down on the spot. If you're in that type of situation, you might need very little. You might be able to get by with just a safety vest and some hand sanitizer in your car, and you're doing your thing. This is specifically if you're going to be going into those types of situations. So also along the lines of understanding your gear, what you have, how to use it all correctly, you have to understand the types of risks that you're walking into and having this proper stuff to use in those situations. And I'm never going to say, well, your newspaper won't buy you, this, and you're going to go to this assignment anyway, so I guess you just don't get it. I mean, I would advocate, at that point you buy it on your own or something. But that's a conversation you just have to have with yourself, with your editors, with, you know, with everyone, and kind of figure it out the best that you can. It's all very individualized. There's not really a good blanket answer for there. Again, some of this was given to me, some of it was bought by employers, some was, you know, stuff that I've purchased over the years. It's just all kind of stuff you collect. Anything else right now?
We have another question, but we'll cycle back at the Q&A at the end.
Okay, sure. Lastly, and this is very specialized, and I totally understand this. A lot of people aren't going to be in these types of situations, but I actually have a custom bulletproof vest. When I covered overnights at the Chicago Tribune, and I was covering overnight homicides every night, these were given to us. These were given to us after Pete Nikias, the reporter there, and I were chased by a guy with a gun for several blocks. So we were put in a really bad situation. We had no protection. The newspaper saw that, understood that problem, and helped to try to mitigate that risk by getting us all custom vests. These were actually, I mean, they measured us. These were custom built for us each. So when I left the Tribune, it didn't make sense for anyone else to have this because it's specifically made for me. So I have this. I wore it every night when I was covering the overnight in Chicago. I think, and I hope the photographers there still do. And not because it provides any sort of extra sense of safety, or I'm going to take any more risks by having it on. I really wore this primarily because I don't know if I'm going to be unlucky. I mean, we photograph people that are unlucky all the time. Guy driving down the street, 46th and Halstead, heard a pop, bullet came through the door, hit him in the side, drove himself to Mount Sinai. You know, I mean, that happens all the time. So I just wore this as an extra safety precaution. When I was covering those types of assignments, I always had the option to turn them down or to opt out at any time that I wanted to. I knew the risks that I was taking there. And so I wore this as just an extra precautionary step to try to help mitigate those risks. We also, you know, we had several photographers there. There was about 4 of us that were covering overnights, and were covering overnight violence. And so they actually brought in a person too, whose job was to run ops in and out of, you know, dangerous war zones and stuff like that, for him to explain situations to us and us to get a better sense. Because again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but education is the most important thing. Understanding what type of situation you're walking into, where can I find safety if I'm going to walk into that situation, you know, where is a good exit? How quickly can I get out of this situation? All of these things are things you got to think about and plan for. And I kind of do it almost unconsciously at this point, and that's from covering the overnight for so long in Chicago. But anytime I walk into a situation, the first thing I'm looking for are the exits. How would I get out if I needed to get out? How would I, how quickly can I get out if I needed to get out? So just some things to keep in mind. I don't want to sound like an alarmist or anything, but it's all helpful stuff to have in the back of your head.
So we'll open this up, the chat for more Q&A for Anthony. I'm seeing one from Catherine from a little bit ago, but what are your thoughts on who should be going out and shoot if you're not for a specific employer, especially regarding the recent competition that was called off?
Sure. So what she's referring to is I made it a point the other day on Twitter to voice my concern about the idea that the NPPA and SPJ are now, well, now it's just SPJ, NPPA is pulled out of it, but they're holding a weekly contest for students with a photo component to it, with a writing component to it. If I understand it correctly, it's multifaceted. But personally, okay, I took issue with it because this is unprecedented, guys. This isn't covering a natural disaster. You know, I compared it to covering a natural disaster, but it's almost a little more like covering 9/11, only it's happening everywhere. And I say that because it's affecting so many people. And after the fact, you have to think of all those people that, you know, had damage to their lungs, that had asbestos issues after 9/11. There's so many factors that they went into that they didn't understand at the time, just because the knowledge was not there. That and I think that this is that times 10. I mean, again, I don't, they could tell us next week that you can transmit it through Zoom. I don't know, we could all be getting it right now, but you know, not really. But you get my point, is that I think that we're still learning a lot of information right now. And so I took the position, and I think several others have taken the position, that right now we're trying to only do what we kind of consider essential assignments. Now, you can take a broad interpretation of what is an essential assignment, but we're trying to not do things that are going to put us at any more risk than absolutely necessary. And then we come right back home. We don't linger out in the community if we don't have to. You know, sometimes we drive around and look for things, but you know, that's a little different when you're staying in your car and you're kind of staying away from everyone, and you're trying to maintain that distance. My biggest concern right now, and I think I said this earlier, but my absolute biggest concern is being asymptomatic myself, giving it to someone either who is vulnerable or giving it to someone in general. And then that ending up in a vulnerable person's death. I mean, that's unconceivable to me. I can't imagine what that would do if I fully understood that directly happened, you know. So that is part of the reason that I'm taking extreme precautions when I go out. I'm of the opinion that right now, unless you're covering this for some sort of information purposes, unless you're covering this for a newspaper, a magazine, on assignment for an agency, some sort of person is needing images to help illustrate and inform the public right now, okay, you can go out, go out. But if you're just I worry, and I'm, maybe I don't give college students entirely enough credit, but I've just seen it too many times, is that the things that win in contests right now, and have always traditionally won in contests, are intimate photos, they're dramatic photos, they're photos that kind of make you stop and say, oh my gosh. But a lot of times those photos involve putting yourself in positions that frankly we can't put ourselves in right now. It's irresponsible to do so. And so I took issue with the idea of promoting a contest where we kind of think of those types of photos as the photos that win, and then encouraging a group of hyper-competitive, incredibly driven, and unfortunately still unexperienced photographers, that we're giving them that motivation to go out with. I just think this is the wrong time for that. This is the wrong situation for that. There's a time and a place to learn journalism. I was a student once. I would have taken offense if someone told me I couldn't cover something. I understand that. I'm not trying to tell you can't cover something. I am saying that I think that when you're covering something, your primary motivation here needs to be one of safety, not only for yourself, but for the people that you're covering. And that having a contest that potentially promotes unsafe practices, even unintentionally, I just don't think there's a place for it right now.
So Dave LaBelle is thanking you right now for saying.
Hi Dave, thank you. I appreciate the support.
So I think we're running out of time if anybody else has any questions, but I do have a personal question for you, is how are you guys finding these stories? Like you spent yesterday with some penguins. I know Jerry Holt found some people exercising in circles out on a street.
Mhm.
You know, how are these people, you know, how are you finding stories and photos right now?
A lot of different ways. You know, we we at the Star Tribune are super lucky. We have an incredible community buy-in here. We have one of the highest reader saturations, or reader penetrations, or whatever the word is, of any major metro in the country. A lot of people here subscribe to the Star Tribune. So we're really fortunate in that a lot of people have reached out to us and told us about events that are going on, either in their community, either through social media or reaching out. Our email is included in our bylines with all of our photos, so that people have a very direct way to get a hold of us if they see something interesting happening. We're definitely monitoring social media, and people are, you know, people in the community are posting pictures. Hey, look what my entire street is out here doing morning yoga every morning. You know, look, you know, and so, oh, well, that's something that we can go check out. And so we'll reach out to that person and try to make sure that there's a safe way that we can do it. And then that's a way that we can find stories too. Sometimes we are just kind of out driving around, or we're driving to and from assignments. I asked our director of photography the other day, I was like, hey, can I just have a day to hit all these things that I've been wanting to go look at that I see on my way to assignments? And right now, I found them to be incredibly, and with, you know, as this is pretty standard here, but even more so right now, I found them to be incredibly receptive to any sort of ideas that we have. If we want to go look at something, we're definitely trying to consider how things are different, how this has impacted things, how scenes and places that we consider very normal look very, very different. And, you know, the other day I spent several hours just walking through the airport. And there's a good example. We had called the airport and asked them to get us through TSA so we could actually walk the terminal. And they were like, no, you know, we're not going to let, you know, you can't do that. You can photograph ahead of TSA. Okay, fine. You can buy a $38 round trip ticket to Orlando right now. So we bought the cheapest plane ticket we could. I walked right through TSA. I walked around the airport for four or 5 hours. It looked like a ghost town. At first I thought I was going to be concerned that there were going to be people there and I'd have to navigate that, but it was very easy to keep 10 feet away from everyone. That's how few people are flying these days. But it was really cool to just get that interesting perspective that I don't think a lot of people realize. You know, you go to an airport and there's one family sitting in an entire concourse, not a gate, not a terminal, the entire concourse. There's like one family waiting to go somewhere. So just trying to find the unusual in the usual, as Mr. Dave LaBelle here's the king of.
So, just got a question from Deborah. Are there some different creative techniques that you're using now that you have to keep that distance?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of imploring everything that we possibly can across the board, from asking people to come out of their house to shooting through windows. We normally, every year, we take the top high school athletes and we bring them into our studio and do portraits of all of them. This year, we asked them all to take selfies, like go out and, you know, go to your favorite place and, you know, flip your camera around and take a selfie. And it's been interesting to see what they've done. You know, it's forcing us to approach things differently. You know, sometimes we might have to use an illustration as opposed to a picture, because we just can't do what we would normally do in a safe way. I know this has been really encouraging for our people that use drones. They've been able to kind of send their drones up in places that they haven't normally been able to send them up because it would be unsafe or it wouldn't be allowed normally. But with the stay-at-home order, there's a little more of an avenue to kind of use that technology and that part of it. But yeah, I mean, we're doing everything that we possibly can and trying to work with subjects as much as we can to accommodate. And people have been really, really, really understanding. You know, I think everyone totally gets the boat that we're all in. And honestly, I have found that when I go out to assignments, sometimes people are just happy to talk to another person. Like one woman was like, I haven't been out of my house in like 10 days. I'm like saying hi to the mailman through the like window, you know? So, you know, when you show up at someone's house, it's really nice. Sometimes they're just really excited to see someone, and that's not one of their housemates.
Yeah. Well, I want to just thank you so much, Anthony, for your time, your information. I highly recommend, if anybody isn't following Anthony on Twitter, he's a great Twitter follow, especially when you open it up and you see pictures of penguins or, you know, whatever he's photographing that day. It normally has, it's just beautiful work. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
yeah.
Thank you all for coming here too and checking this out and valuing safety. I mean, I really think it's important. I don't think it's stressed enough in our industry. I think we kind of tend sometimes to be a super hyper competitive group, and we put you know, getting the best image possible above everything else. But I do think it's important sometimes to pump the brakes, to consider what you're doing, to consider the situation that you're in, the stuff that you have with you, the gear you have, everything, and really kind of take safety into consideration. It's really important. It's how you have a long career doing this, you know. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah. So at this time we are breaking for our lunch break. So everybody go get a delicious meal on your own, and we will see you back in our, let's see, what research tells you about the value of photojournalism from Sarah Quinn, and that will be at 1:45 p.m. Central. What time zone are we in? We're in Central time zone.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Hannah, so much. I really appreciate it.